Hey, and welcome to Bitcoin and Beyond. I am Melanie Carstens, and every week we explore the thought leaders, the founders, the builders, the creators that are shaping the future of Bitcoin and artificial intelligence. Today, I am joined by my friend CryptoDude. He's a builder in the Stacks ecosystem who ships continuously. He never stops across multiple platforms and projects. So super cool to have him here today. This is also my final show of the year. So we will look a little bit, back over 2025. We'll reflect over a couple of the highlights. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to ship on Bitcoin L2s. We're going to dig into projects that CryptoDude is building. Stacks, Pots, BoostX, CryptoNauts, CryptoCash, and a whole bunch more. Like I said, he doesn't stop. So we've got a lot to talk about. Before we dive in, a quick note. This is independent Bitcoin media. So if you enjoy the show, please help support my work. You can like, you can share, you can subscribe on YouTube, and you can also use the link in my bio for additional ways to support the work. So would definitely appreciate that. And let's kick off. CryptoDude, welcome to the show.
Hey. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Ninja. Should I call you Ninja today?
Sure, I guess. I mean, if you want, whatever's clever.
whatever floats my boat this New Year's show.
I can't believe 2025 is already wrapping up. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. I'd also be hiding. I should be hiding. No, it's been a good year, I think. And let's talk about that eventually. But you know what? I've never had you on Bitcoin and Beyond. So I'm going to ask you a question that I always ask to kick the show off. And that is to share your Bitcoin story, how you first got into Bitcoin, and whether you started just by holding or whether you sort of hit the ground running with with building, and then kind of moving into Stacks. So yeah, let's hear your story.
Okay. Bitcoin. When did I first start getting into Bitcoin? Let's see here. It was most definitely pretty early. I think it was 2012 maybe, or 2011, and I basically was just really into, I was, just kind of fed up with, the status quo in terms of politics. I didn't like how essentially it felt like basically as an individual, my voice didn't matter. And, I always believed that people should have, more authority over their own lives and be less subjective to third-party dictation. And so, I was always been freedom oriented, like even before I discovered Bitcoin, right? I've been a voluntarist for way before I discovered Bitcoin. And then, during my technical career, I was, I basically just stumbled upon Bitcoin. And I was just looking for basically new ways to, facilitate communication and monetary transactions over the internet, because, I worked in the telecommunications industry for quite a while before that. And, it was just something I discovered kind of by happenstance. And it really intrigued me because the nature of its permissionlessness. And, from then I pretty much started building on it. I want to say I probably first discovered it about 2011. I think I started building on it, I want to say 2013. I kind of just like knew about it, didn't really, like dive deep in immediately. But as soon as I kind of started to see how politics was pretty much, I was pretty aware that politics was very, problematic before that. But, I kind of was like thinking, maybe they just got to get, right people in there maybe, or some BS. And then I started to realize, it's corrupt at the core. And there's a fundamental problem with the nature of how we organize society. And I started to see Bitcoin as more than just a monetary tool, but a social order tool. And, from there, I started to think, well, how can we best leverage Bitcoin? And, the programmability of Bitcoin back then was very limited because we didn't have stacks, we didn't have, an L2. So we were, there's only certain things we could achieve. And so we needed more extensibility and more functionality, more programmability, basically.
Mm.
Hammering on Bitcoin long enough, you realize you're most definitely not going to be able to do some certain things because of the nature of the speed. That's, I guess, what led me to discover, not discover stacks, but to be a part of stacks and Blockstack back in the day. Back before it was called stacks, it was called Blockstack. Before it was called Blockstack, it was called one name. So, it's been a while and quite an evolution of things, but it's all been philosophical in terms of what's kept driving me and my participation. Largely is trying to build the change, try to, basically build tools for people to leverage that allows them to have more monetary freedom and monetary security. That's, I guess you'd say, the long story short.
Yeah. And when you say originally you kind of dove into building on Bitcoin, what do you mean about that? Was that prior to you discovering one name?
Yeah, I mean, it was very limited on what I was doing because the nature of Bitcoin's programmability. I mean, I was creating things like little integrated switches that were listening to on-chain events. So, like, kind of leveraging the op return before it was really popular, and basically I guess, very basic, like executional. Listen for a transaction, do something, if this, then that type of stuff, real basic on back then. But yeah, that was, I think, I set up a Raspberry Pi to do some like GPIO controls based on Bitcoin events and stuff like that.
Sure. So you've really run the gamut. I mean, you've been there kind of from real early days and right through to where we are now. So, I mean, what a story that is. That in itself is an incredible Bitcoin story, so you kind of found, it's one name you said, hey? That's before Blockstack. You found that because of your kind of desire for this ownership of your personal,
Yeah, exactly. Well,
your identity.
Yeah, it was, during the process of needing more programmability on Bitcoin, I was like, there's got to be other things out there that can facilitate some of these things that I'm looking for, specifically decentralized namespaces. And, I was already very familiar with domain names and DNS and, the centralized nature of DNS and, how I guess you'd say, the insecurity of DNS. And, that's what led me to discover what was Namecoin at the time. And, one name was being built on Namecoin. So Namecoin is kind of like I guess you'd say, the original way we facilitated namespace registration on chain. It was way before we had Blockstack, right? And so I was needing something similar for one of the apps I was building back in the day. And so I was like, hey, look at this. This is pretty cool. And then I was like, register on one of the old school names. I think I had I forgot. I had a few different. It was all .IDs.
All what?
.ID.
Oh, right. So those were the first ones, .id. So that was the original. What was the original? I mean, obviously prior to ENS, was this being built? Was this all prior to ENS?
Yeah.
So BNS is before ENS, even though a lot of people don't even know that, or not.
I have to double check. I mean, it's probably very parallel, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure BNS, like on Namecoin, I'm pretty sure Namecoin was the first. And so, yeah, I'm like 99% positive Namecoin was before Ethereum CNS.
And that was Manib, was it? Manib and
No, Munib leveraged Namecoin. He didn't build Namecoin. So they leveraged Namecoin for its essentially its block space. So once they had working knowledge of how that functionally worked, then they were like, well, how can we do this on Bitcoin? So that's when they tapped into the operaturn, and we originally had names. We once we transitioned from one name, we went to obviously Blockstack, and then that was directly on the L1 of Bitcoin. Not optimized basically, and once that evolved, eventually we spun up the L2 or the Stacks chain, and then we even had BNSV was more like BNSV2 at that time, but we called it BNS just at that time, and that lived on the Stacks blockchain. And then there were still some needs for improvement to happen, and so that was what led to BNSV2 on Stacks. And that's where we're at today. We have basically what's called BNS version 2 on Stacks too.
How involved have you been, or are you in BNS? Are you involved at all with it?
From the builder's point of view, I build with it like daily, but like I'm not like the guys building it. Yeah, I've been trying to put my 2 cents in the hat, so to speak, since the early days. They'll try to say, hey, it'd be nice if we could do this. How about we have this feature here? Basically trying to communicate the because I come from a point of view of like DNS, I worked at an ISP or an internet service provider for quite a while, and I dealt with DNS a lot, and seeing how it was used functionally and its intention, and then its shortcomings from a technical point of view. And so that's what kind of kept it's like, hey, let's have basically the same standard but better. And we most definitely have accomplished that, by the way. Like BNSV2 is, I said we most definitely have accomplished that, by the way. BNSV2 is super based.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. I mean, let's talk about what, for those people who are watching this because they came to hear about Bitcoin, let's talk about what you can do on Bitcoin. I mean, what is BNS? Let's give a quick, just for people who don't know, like what is a quick
probably to understand
update on BNS and where is it kind of going? Just a brief kind of outline on that.
Okay, to probably to best understand what BNS is, like Bitcoin name service, you probably need to understand what DNS is, domain name service. DNS is basically how you translate human readable names into IP addresses. That's like when you type in, whatever.com in your browser, on the back end of your browser, and kind of like in the background, a process of DNS translation takes place. So your computer calls to a DNS server and says, hey, I'm trying to get to so-and-so website. How do I get there? And the DNS server responds and says, here's the IP address of the server you're trying to go to. And then in your background of your browser, the navigation takes place, and you actually resolve to that because it's resolvable, right?
Yeah.
And to, get that translation, that DNS translation, the owner of the domain name has to register the domain name. They have to define the records in the domain name to point to their servers. So that way, when people try and go to their website or go to their server via that domain name, it actually resolves. Standard internet, right? And so the problem with that is DNS is centrally authoritative, meaning there's a handful of registrars out there, GoDaddy, stuff like that, 2 cows. Yeah. Sorry. And so those different registrars out there, they basically have authority over your domain. You don't really own your domain names. You don't really own your .com. You lease it, basically.
Yep.
And they can just revoke it whenever they want, really, because it's essentially authoritative. You know, if they get the government shutdown because you're telling the truth, you're done. They just intercept the DNS record and it goes to a different server. They just change the record, and you now, when people typed in your domain name, instead of going to your server, it goes to their server. You don't want that. You don't want to be able to accidentally mislead people into a destination on the internet, because, you know, it's just fundamentally problematic. And exactly, dangerous. And so BNS blocks, or, you know, Bitcoin naming system, it takes the same principle of human readable names to translate into records rather than IP address. You can just look at a name into a record, right? You know, name into a pointer record. BNS does the same thing, but it does it with a decentralized authoritative model. So it's you as the individual actually own the namespace, or the name on the namespace, and you can actually even create your own namespaces if you want. But you basically have, you know, the private keys that define the records on your name. So you are the authority, not, it's kind of like to be your own bank, but be your own registrar. We have the capacity to actually do the registration of human readable names that point to, you know, locations or have records, is what they call them, you know, in a non-permissionless or in a permissionless manner. So we don't need to ask GoDaddy to register.
Now, a weird thing happened to me the other day. I was transferring funds into Binance, and when I typed the address in, now I don't know how this happened, but you know, Tinderly, it came up, it said in my Xverse wallet, you're transferring funds to Tinderly.btc.
Do you type in Tinderly, or?
No, I put in the address.
Is this on a web browser?
Yeah.
Yeah, your web browser can remember fields, and if fields have specific, you know, similar identifiers under the hood, so to speak, then it'll try to auto-populate. That's probably just some auto-population stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, I sent the money. Eventually, I just thought, okay, well, let me test it with a little bit of, you know, a small amount, because I know it's Tinderly. So, but I was like, out of all the things in the world, how could I know the name of the person, and I know the person whose .btc appeared? And I just thought that is the weirdest thing, because I've never sent Tinderly anything.
You probably filled out his name in a field when dealing with the DRANs or something like that. The Tinderly.btc in your browser detected the same field identifier, so it's like, hey, do you mean this one?
So I just
usually how that auto-populate works.
The reason I brought it up was I discovered subsequently, you know, because I just thought I'll test it, like I said, with a small amount, and I sent it, and it actually goes to the address, not the BT. It didn't go to Tinderly.btc. It went to the actual Binance address, and it said on Binance, because I was kind of looking into it, that they own like a pile of addresses that they just keep swapping around. So you can't. Basically, what I'm trying to say, if anybody does see this, because if I've seen it, potentially it could happen to somebody else, is that it doesn't matter. As long as the string, if I say to you, this is my address, but CryptoDude comes up, it's still going to go to me.
Yeah, so to take the whole premise of what I was talking about in the human readable names and into translatable records, so like DNS, it's, you know, whatever .com into an IP address. You're surfing to that IP address, basically, right? When you're navigating your browser. Well, with BNS, you can do similar things, but you can also, you know, the .btc, for example, my CryptoDude.btc, if you type that in your Xverse wallet, if you type in CryptoDude.btc, it'll automatically convert it into the payment address, you know, the long string that's not really human readable, you know, starts with SP, right? SP, blah, 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 you know, and you know, that's a way that we typically leverage BNS in the Stacks ecosystem, is for translation of payment addresses. but you can most definitely use it to translate other records. So
Mm.
whether or not those are TXT records or A records or whatever.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to talk about you recently, congratulations, won an award for the developer who never sleeps. Congratulations. Very
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so let's talk about that. So you're a developer. I mean, what a nice award to get. It kind of like really highlights all the work that you have been doing over the last kind of year or two. Um, what does that mean? You know, shipping. I mean, the show we've called the show shipping on Bitcoin L2 on Stacks.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? You know, as a dev like you, who is, you know, building all of these things. Um, it's not massive teams. It's not, you know, these. It's you, and it's you like really committing to these projects. I've been with you through this journey where it's kind of like a lot of it really deserves retroactive funding because it's been building for the Stacks ecosystem without real without money. You know, you're not. It's not like somebody saying, "Okay, here is $50,000, build BoostX."
Mm-hmm.
You know, those kind of things just come out of you sort of grinding away. So let's talk about that, because I think it's important for, you know, if we've got builders watching and they kind of go, okay, well, we're interested in Saks, we're interested in working on Bitcoin. The job really is going, looking for those pain points, seeing what people need,
Mm-hmm.
and then creating this without really, you know, expecting massive funding up front.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just kind of want to talk about that as a builder who really is working hard in this ecosystem, what that feels like and what it looks like.
Okay. Yeah. First off, you know, I am gonna say it's all about persistence and resilience and realizing your idea is gonna take iteration. Like it's not gonna be something you can, like, if it's something you can one shot with an AI, or if it's something you can, you know, do in an afternoon, I mean, yeah, go for it, I guess. But if more than likely that's gonna be lower on the value proposition if it's able to be built in an afternoon, or, you know, one shot with an AI. So if you're trying to turn it into a business model, you know, you're going to realize you're going to need to iterate and be persistent and resilient on your vision. Like that's the first thing, because it's going to take time. I mean, there's been a lot of hours sunk into this, like, for sure, by a lot of different people, not just me. So, you know, from my general point of view, don't get frustrated by bugs. That's part of the process. You know, you're going to encounter a bug with whenever you're writing your app or whatever. You're going to be like, well, that's not how I wanted it to work. What the heck? And you're going to need to be able to think critically and adapt to why that's happening. Read the actual debug log and be like, you know, or you know, perhaps actually catch your errors. That's a lot of people don't even do that. So, you know, make sure you know how to write functions with the ability to, you know, properly analyze the outputs and, you know, figure out what's going on. But, you know, aside from the general practices and procedures of programming, resilience is like the number one thing you're going to want to have. You got to be able to stick with it. And I think having not just a monetary motive is kind of critical, because, like, to me, monetary motive is obviously nice. It's nice to get paid and all that, for sure. But for me, it's building on Bitcoin is, I mean, I could go work on an ISP and get paid. You know, that's not a big deal. I could go work at, you know, lots of different places and get paid. That's not a big deal. The thing that motivates me about Bitcoin and building on Bitcoin is how critical it is to actually having a civilized society. Like we have, you know, kind of some crazy politicians that tend to rise to the top or whatnot. And, you know, I think the individual's sovereignty is paramount, especially the more technology advances, the more destructive capacity we have as individuals. So our individuality, or our individual stake in society, and our individual like needs and everything, our core being basically needs to be upgraded. Like we have very, I don't want to say this like just outright, but politicians are pretty messed up. I'm sure you guys have noticed. Like they
yeah, let's just say it. I'm happy to say it. It's like why I think a lot of us are here. It is a shit show.
It is a big old shit show.
Yeah.
Politics is a big old shit show. They really are very toxic, we'll just say. And I believe in creating human relationships that are based on consent. That's what volunteerism is all about. And Bitcoin is a big old tool to help facilitate that, because you have proof of consent with your transactions. Well, relative proof of consent, it's obviously not perfect because you can still get wrench attacked, I guess. But at scale, it's much more difficult to twist everybody's arm at the same time. You can't just go to the bank and be like, blacklist them all. Like you can't. We've seen that in during COVID in Canada. I mean, there was lots of truckers that were blacklisted because they didn't want to take the shot. And, it turned into a pretty nasty lawfare, basically. And, this allows us our Bitcoin and, programmable Bitcoin specifically gives us the ability to actually build a civilized society, I think, in my opinion. That's what it's about for me. And,
I think that, what happened in COVID in Canada, I think that was kind of a moment where Bitcoin really proved what it was. It proved its mettle. It was like, look, it was its moment in a big way, I think,
Oh, yeah. I mean, it still proves itself daily to, I mean, obviously I live in America. It's, pretty well insulated from, I guess you'd say major, like, economic, fuck ups, I guess you'd say. There's a lot of insulation, even though like it's kind of a shit show everywhere nowadays.
Yeah.
But the Bitcoin's value proposition is 100% predicated on recognition that politics leads to one end, which is destruction. And, people like to say voluntarists and anarchists are agents of chaos. No, we're agents of order. That's, we have basically one desire. That's to honor the individual's freedom and sovereignty. Exactly. No rulers, just rules based on consent.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Look, I think what I read something recently where it was like, while the Roman Empire was falling, nobody was walking around saying it's collapsing. That was something they looked at. I'm talking about the general population.
Mm-hmm.
It was something they looked back on and went like, oh my God, it fell. Because people also can't face. I've had conversations with people who are specifically my age and older, who've spent a lifetime building up a fiat retirement, who will say, they can't even think about it and they can't talk about it because so much of their wealth is kind of wound up in shares or in investments that it just feels so risky at this age to kind of just go, okay, well, fuck it. I'm just going to try this because of whatever reasons. And it was like, we're going to look at in the next kind of say 10 to 15 years, you're going to see a lot of like younger people in their 30s having a lot more money than people in their 50s, because all those retirement savings, and this is not financial advice, so please do not take it as financial advice at all. It's just a conversation and it's just musings, okay? But potentially we're going to have a case of a lot of people over 50 that are struggling with their retirement, because I mean, the value of their fiats is going down.
There's most definitely going to be a pain point happening for, people in this specific, I guess, age group, because, they effectively have been rugged by the fiat monetary system their whole life. They've been earning value that's been accelerating at its deterioration. And so, all I can say to those people is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Learn how to diversify some, even if you're not comfortable taking a large chunk of your portfolio into Bitcoin, it would be stupid not to take at least some of it. I mean, that's just basic my advice. You can call that investment advice or financial advice. I don't give a fuck. Like, oh no, freedom of speech. Like,
yeah, exactly. Okay,
like,
it's financial advice for us. We take it seriously, and that's why we're here.
I'm not a financial advisor from a regulatory point of view, but I am a free advisor. And if you like freedom, get fucking Bitcoin. Like, that's how it works.
Well, exactly, really. And I think it's proving itself. I think one of the biggest problems, and I mean, there was this whole thing with Michael Saylor recently with, and I think we've spoken about it before. I've written an essay on it where it's like, are they in many ways, I mean, you can't centralize Bitcoin, obviously, but you can take, it started off as this supposedly peer-to-peer,
peer-to-peer cash.
Yeah. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. And we kind of looking at a situation now where the average population or the general population are kind of still trying to catch up. And yet you're getting all these institutions, governments. I saw a thing the other day, Bhutan in they have got like some ridiculous amount of Bitcoin. I mean, how crazy is that? The monks in Bhutan have bought up like piles of Bitcoin.
That's so surprising.
Yeah,
to be honest.
but I mean, how amazing is that? But what I'm trying to say here is, what are your thoughts on that? On the case of now we've got all these Michael Saylor piling it up. He's saying now he wants to release a central bank currency and almost operate as the world's largest private bank, using Bitcoin as his kind of foundational, I don't know.
I'm not sure how I feel about Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy. I mean, I'm pro Bitcoin, obviously, and he seems to be pro Bitcoin as well. But I also hear him, kind of like every once in a while say weird little things, and I'm like, say that again.
But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? On all these, people buying up massive chunks of it, and you kind of like have anybody who is in the like crypto world, people who might not have piles of Bitcoin, or even people who do, they're kind of going like, yay, number go up, that's all great. But what are the underlying reasons why that number goes up? And it's not hundreds of thousands of millions of people buying a little bit of Bitcoin. It's these massive empires creating massive empires. Surely that's not a good thing.
I mean, it's selling them the rope to hang themselves with. I mean, like the government is here's the way I look at it. More adoption of Bitcoin by individuals is most definitely preferred, rather than big old massive corporations, because rich people are already rich, right? They don't need to be any richer. But I mean, if they want to adopt and get on board, that's fine. I mean, it's a better alignment of incentives, or better philosophically. And so, in terms of what I think about that, how it's potentially problematic, it most definitely is a little bit concerning to see, corporations and governments front running the individual basically on adoption of Bitcoin. They're adopting Bitcoin and, buying it in mass. And then out the other side of their mouth, they're demonizing Bitcoin to the individual, saying, oh, don't you dare get this. So,
exactly.
it's
Exactly.
that
And
should be your signal to get something. Like when they tell you not to.
that's the thing. And the reason I say this is because I think, I've told you before, I've worked in the music industry for 20 odd years, right? And when Napster brought out, when Napster enabled us to download music for free, the record labels took them to court. Okay, the big five, let's say the big three, majorly, the big three took them to court. Okay, and killed Napster. But at the same time, they built Spotify because Spotify, large chunk of the shares of Spotify were given to record labels by Daniel Ek in order to license the artist's music without artist permission. Okay, so basically they were told you're going to be earning this much per album, and it went down to 0.8 cents or something, 0.00. And to me, that always sticks in my mind. Like, I always think to myself, it's always this case of hiding behind, like, we're going to kill Napster and then we're going to use all our wealth and all our power because we own the record industry, and we're going to build Spotify so that nobody else can do this because the technology now is out there and people have caught a wind of it. And I often think about that when it comes to Bitcoin.
That's a great observation and great analogy. There's a lot of similarities and parallels there. I mean, Napster was most definitely P2P technology. Bitcoin's P2P. It's permissionless trading of information, basically. I mean, that's the real thing that the government and, the power establishment does not want you to have, this freedom of information, basically. That information is power. And if you control information, you have power. But if you don't control information, you don't have the power. So, Bitcoin offers the ability for the individual to take monetary control and information control. And so, that's the thing that the power establishment is most afraid of, is the lack of control of information, because they have a total dominance. Basically they want to dominate all forms of communication, so that way they can monitor it, that way they can censor it, so that way they can disrupt and essentially maintain power. It's all about maintaining power.
Yeah, well, that's what
power maintains power. Yeah, exactly. Power only cares about power.
Every institution is about power and control. I mean, it's just, we could have I think we must do a whole show. You and I could talk. I really think we could talk for hours on this topic, because it's such an interesting topic. And I think more and more people, the language, one of the things I think affect adoption, because I do want to move on to talking about, your year, Stacks' year, and building on L2's, because we've kind of veered off. But I think one of the problems that I think Bitcoin has, that's happened unintentionally, is the language that's used around it. It's so different, but it also comes with such different language that when you pile it all together, it's so scary, because it's taking people's money. And if you look at the average person, they don't even have money to save. Your average general population person has no money to say, even a small amount of money, specifically because people are struggling to get by. And so it's kind of like, I was thinking the other day, we use words like, decentralized, peer-to-peer, the hardest money, we kind of, because
crash power and there's all sorts of terminology that's baked in.
Yeah. And then what's pushed out there, or because, the risk of giving the general population control, it's kind of this, every time there's a story where somebody lost money, that hits the news, so when you say these words, people are hearing like Ponzi scheme, scam. You must hear it all the time, where people say, oh, my friend lost money, on Bitcoin because they met someone on Facebook who said they can help them invest in Bitcoin, and then they lost money. And you just think, well, I mean, yeah, would you give your money to anyone on Facebook that you don't really know? But
Yeah.
so I feel like if we just use the words money and wallet, digital wallet, we kind of, it's like I feel like the language needs to normalize.
Yeah. I was just going to say there is most definitely an issue when it comes to Bitcoin was created by a bunch of nerds, so don't it's gonna be inherently I guess you'd say laced with nerd language, right? So translating that into normie speak, so to speak, has been kind of most definitely one of the harder selling points of the technology. I try to do that as well, though. I try to break it down into like more meaningful, more tangible, or more functional examples, so that way people can understand what the hell I mean. If you can't sell Bitcoin to your mom and onboard your mom, right, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So
it needs to look like your average banking app. It's kind of like, I feel like the when you open a digital wallet, instead of trying to make it complex or like you say, I mean, it's not a bad thing, because it was built by
needs to be bored down a little bit boring, right?
Yeah, it needs to be simple, like put money in, send money out, spend money on your groceries, for now. So I kind of like always think about that. It's like, how do you and simple things, like I did a talk recently and I put a slide up. Didn't actually know it was going to be to a whole bunch of bankers. It was at a crypto event, and I thought it was going to be like a whole lot of Bitcoiners, but it turns out it was like people in banking and in our what was called SARS, the South African Revenue Service.
First slide, kill the banks.
Yeah. And I literally, it was so funny. I nearly had a T-shirt made called "Fuck the Banks," but I didn't. Okay, thank God. And one of the slides that I had up was Bitcoin versus the bank. And it had this graph that I'd made where it said, if you had put away $100 every month for 5 years into my banking account, which charges, so I used the amount of 100 Rand, which is like hardly any dollars. So I used the amount of 100 Rand. My banking charges are 200 and something Rand a month. So that's my banking charges. So if I took a bank account and I put 100 Rand a month in my bank account, I would have minus money after. Not only would my spending power be disappeared,
you would be in debt.
I would be in debt to the bank. Okay.
Just the way they like it.
And even the cheapest, I mean, the say you went, okay, let's just have a cheap savings account. That's still 35 Rand a month. So I would be saving 70, what would it be? 65 Rand a month I'd be saving. But I didn't take that into account. I just pretended there was no bank fees. And I said, okay, you're going to take 100 Rand away a month and you're going to put it in the bank. Let's pretend you're not ripping me off.
Bank graph go down, Bitcoin graph go up. They're like, oh crap. They call it.
So you would have, say you didn't have bank charges. Say you put it under your pillow. Because you would have negative if you did the bank down.
You're saving in a bank, saving under your pillow, saving in Bitcoin.
Yeah. And if you put it under your pillow, it would still be shit because of inflation and
just not as bad.
Your spending power, but not as bad as the banks. Now, this is what I'm saying. Okay,
that's hilarious.
And then I was like, and if you'd bought Bitcoin for 5 years and put just 100 Rands worth of Bitcoin in your bank account for 5 years, I mean, in your crypto wallet, you'd have 18,000 Rand.
Yeah, much more appreciation of purchasing power. Yeah, the
finite nature. The organizer said to me, "Do you realize that this was a lot of banking people in here?"
Yeah, good. Give them a wake up call.
I felt that, but anyway, that is.
I'm sure it gave them a lot. You probably put a lot of fire underneath their butts because they're realizing, hey, yeah, actually, what the heck? This is going to disrupt the shit out of us. So we better do something.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the kind of, to me, it's very simple, language like that. Here's a graph. It's provable, because you just look at a Bitcoin graph and you can ask ChatGPT, if you don't really believe me. Anyway, I do want to ask you so many things, but like I'm running out of time. So I really want to have you on again. Okay. Let's talk about what you are building. I mean, you deep into the D grants. You received a couple of grants this year for what you're doing. Do you want to just give us some of the highlights, and then we'll move on to really sort of talking about building on L2s, what that means, and kind of look at stacks on a whole, like the year, and just a couple of thoughts about stacks going forward. So quite a lot of things that I still want to cover.
Okay.
But let's start with just a little bit about what's going on with you.
Okay. Yeah, so we got a couple grants, like you mentioned. We got a SIP31 interim grant for BoostX to add and finish our roadmap, basically. And that's progressing nicely. We should be turning in our milestone 1 for that this week. And then, we've got a D grant for CryptoNude, which...
Sorry, let's just talk about a quick little, what is BoostX for people who don't know, and how can they use it?
BoostX is basically an extension that you can install from the Chrome Web Store. Allows you to connect your existing Stacks wallet, whether or not that's Ledger or Xverse, or a Signa Vaults. But you can connect your existing Stacks wallet to social platforms like X and Discord, allowing you to basically send and receive, Stacks and SBTC directly on the timeline, so to speak, on X. So once you install the extension, anybody that's rocking a BNS name like this CryptoDude.btc on their their Twitter handle, or not their handle, but their display name rather. If you're rocking a BNS name on your display name, the extension will detect that. It'll insert a little rocket, icon on your tweets, and then people can tip you directly from your tweets with some SBTC or any of the supported tokens on Stacks. There's also additional functionality in BoostX like space drops, so you can leverage, basically coming together in a space. If people in the space are also rocking a BNS name, .btc name, you can actually do an airdrop to everybody in the space. So it's a good, interesting model for being able to grow a community on X. It's basically SocialFi on Bitcoin right there on X. We've got also integration on Discord, so you can go to discord.com or you can go to x.com. You can connect your existing wallet to either one of them. We do have plans to put it on other apps as well, inject it into other apps as well down the road, like other social medias. But we're just trying to complete our roadmap for it. All our functions and features, basically get them dialed in, get that completed, and then at that point we should be able to be in a real solid position to be able to start putting it in other social networking apps. Probably going to do other streaming apps like Kick and Twitch and try to get it in there for more visibility across the different social channels out there. But basically, BoostX is SocialFi on Bitcoin. It's the easiest way to describe it.
So right now you can go along, you can head over to somebody who's got a .btc, and what happens when you click the little the rocket?
Just a little modal pops up, little form. It presents their payment their name and then their translated payment address, so that way you can see that if you want. Allows you to select your action. So if you want to transfer them STX or transfer them tokens, or transfer them a non-fungible token, or even transfer them a BNS name, there's going to be other actions in there as well. But it allows you to select, I want to transfer this user some SBTC, for example. Type in how much you want to actually input. You can also even put in not just a memo, but also a message, and those are encoded all on chain. There's a link back even to the tweet that you are tipping the person with, or if say you created a tweet and you click the rocket on your tweet and tipped you via that, then you in the on-chain transaction on chain, there's a record basically that points back to your tweet, so that way people could see, oh, there's value transmitted, and the reason why the value was transmitted is because this tweet, basically. So we kind of have like proof of, I guess you'd say, good content, for lack of a better word. And we can trace it all back through the chain now, so we can create kind of like a a way for you as a content creator to track how you're receiving the crypto, where you're receiving it from, like what content is driving your gains, so that way you can be like, oh, people are resonating with this type of content. Let me go ahead and, they really liked my my music. Let me go ahead and post another one of my songs. Maybe people like it some more. It's a way for you to track it back. There's other things going on with BoostX. We got quite a few features in there. I'm keeping it real top level. You can boost tweets and you can space drop, but there's other things in there you can do. I won't deep dive into them because I know we're kind of strapped for time, but we can just leave it at BoostX is SocialFi on Bitcoin. We're bringing the power of Bitcoin directly to the timeline.
Brilliant. And we will. Let's have a show on, because I do want to deep dive what you are building, because a lot of fun things. And I do want to find out more about it, like what you are, where it is going. Are we eventually going to be able to kind of, would you ever look at, or can that ever happen, that you could actually send Bitcoin, or would it always be SBTC and stacks?
In terms of sending Bitcoin directly, yeah, it's most definitely doable. I mean, the reason why it hasn't been done is largely because I'm just trying to build on, the extend out the functionality of stacks, but we already do facilitate authentication with Xverse and Leather, which also is a Bitcoin wallet. So the capacity to get the mainnet address of the sender, that's already there. The receiver's mainnet address for Bitcoin, that's going to be predicated on their BNS name translation. So translating the name into the record is where that kind of hinges, because right now it natively translates just into a stacks address. For them to define their Bitcoin address in there, they have to set a little record. So it's doable. It just takes a little more involvement from the user to make that translation.
I mean, this is such an incredible thing. Why hasn't anybody else done it? Because I mean, and also, like, how, because you putting a service onto X, sort of, in a way. I mean,
we have permissionless. We have permissionless content monetization. We've enabled permissionless content monetization on X. That's basically what we have.
Yeah, I mean, why has someone else done it? It's so smart.
From a technical point of view, I can understand why they haven't done it. You have to understand a fair amount of stuff. You got to understand how stacks authentication works, and stacks transactions, and clarity, and kind of the L2 and stuff. And then you also have to understand how websites work in terms of the DOM, and how the browser works, and in terms of content script injection. And there's quite a few pieces kind of that are making this work in terms of, like, from a technical point of view, it looks straightforward. It's click a button, sign in, you're connected, and click another button and send your money. It's very logical and straightforward in terms of UI UX. But from like a functional or technical point of view, it's been a journey to get to this point. Like, I started building a different app called DRUP before BoostX, which was essentially a decentralized social network, built on Bitcoin and secured, by Bitcoin. And the difficulty there is it's very much a chicken and the egg scenario, because people want to create content on social networks, but only if there's users. And users don't go to networks unless there's content. So it's like catch-22.
Yep.
And so, BoostX was the solution to that. It's basically, we're going to leverage existing social apps to build a content base and a user base. And then, we can basically pivot our way into a social network that's more decentralized over time. But this will be, I guess you'd say, the 2.5 way of doing it.
Can somebody who can a Web 2 build happen like this, or is it because it's a Web 3?
I look at it like it's I look at BoostX as like a Web 2.5 application.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is, like, can somebody who's like a traditional builder who isn't building with, one of the Web3 programs or whatever you call it. Like, say somebody who just works in a normal day building Web2 websites and whatever, and suddenly goes, okay, I want to do this. Is that possible? Could anybody, what I'm trying to say is, could anybody actually have done it?
Oh,
As
yeah,
long
yeah.
as they understood all these little parts.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not a special snowflake. You know what I'm saying? Like,
to me, it's like, I don't know if I'm just being stupid or whatever, but I just cannot believe that this hasn't been done before.
well, it most definitely takes persistence and some nerd chops, we'll say.
But that is, to me, the most, the best and easiest things. And that's why I was talking about the language of Bitcoin and the wallets that we use, because the simplicity of it in terms of what the user experience and the complexity of the back end put together is what makes some of the most extraordinary things. And I think if you look at Netflix and Spotify, one of the reasons that it made everything so easy was because you need a credit card, you go on, you pay an amount, and you've got access to all of the music in the world. I mean, and you press a button and it comes out.
Yeah, it's like the user experience matters a lot for user adoption, for sure. The easier it is to use, the more intuitive it is to use, the more users are going to use it. The more rewarding it is for users to use, the more users are going to use it. The more fun it is for users to use, the more users are going to use it. So tapping into the fun, listening to the feedback, those have been critical for user adoption. I would say, though, from the UX point of view or the user experience point of view, it's most definitely been a journey, like to largely, the technical side of things, I probably have like 20 plus years of R&D. I mean, probably more than that, but I've been a nerd since I was like, I want to say probably 8 years old, and I'm in my 40s. So I'm leveraging a fair amount of nerd knowledge to do this. But from a technical point of view, yes, anybody could do it. From a I guess you'd say motive point of view, it's not going to be easy. It's you're going to need to be like,
you need to have your chops.
You're going to have persistence more than anything. And a desire to actually see it through. That's the key.
I know. Well, that is it, isn't it? Because sometimes it just can get exhausting because, it's, I can imagine there's a lot of potholes along the way. But you mentioned fun, let's talk about fun. Let's talk about CryptoNauts and what you're building there as well, because that is, again, I think the beauty of how you're building is by, you've brought BoostX to X. Now you're taking CryptoNauts to Steam. So you're taking these Web3 builds and you're taking them to where people are.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, and you're doing it as well with Dcast as well, where you're going, okay, let's use something that people can use in the I want to say the real world, because this isn't the real world.
No, it's all our imagination. No, the CryptoNauts is the game we're building on Unreal Engine. We just turned in our milestone 2 NRG grants for that. So we got one more milestone left to deliver. We were aiming to try and launch and go live on Steam on Christmas, but obviously that didn't happen. Game development is most definitely, we'll just say challenging, but I love a good challenge.
Listen, I think life in itself, just getting life organized, is challenging. So
yeah, so we're super far along in it, though. I mean, it's actually kind of crazy how much has been already built. but I don't want to push it out too soon because I want it to be, fun. I like the. It's one thing to show off what can be done in a rudimentary, primitive point of view. It's another thing to show something that can be done and it's fun to keep doing, right? And so having that first impression be really, memorable and exciting and fun and something people can, share their friends and tell their friends about. That's super important to being able to actually build momentum. And so, we've postponed the launch of it a little bit. We're still kicking at it though. I don't want to give it an exact time on it, but it will be as soon as possible. And, what we've basically facilitated though is the ability to already connect your Stacks wallet to an Unreal Engine game and then also invoke transactions, basically, from your game basically. And so there's kind of been some interesting things that I'll tell you about that we've kind of learned along the way, or not learned along the way, but kind of realized along the way during building this. Is we've also kind of realized there's probably a high probability that we can build GameFi into games that are also on consoles. So people running Xboxes, PS5s, you can build, obviously you can leverage Unreal Engine to build games on those platforms, on those consoles, right? That's Unreal Engine allows you to build for Windows and Mac and Linux and, Nintendo Switch and all the different consoles out there, So Unreal Engine is a game engine, obviously. And being able to, introduce GameFi into games, that's what's CryptoNude is kind of showcasing. We're building out a fun game experience that kind of highlights what you can do on Stacks in game and powered by Bitcoin, secured by Bitcoin. But, we kind of realized, holy crap, we actually probably could do this on a console even. So I won't go too deep into the details of there, but there's a high probability that we can leverage GameFi and introduce GameFi in not just on PC gaming, but also on console gaming. So that's going to be a huge unlock. I'll leave it at that, but we'll just say coming soon.
Coming soon.
That probably won't be part of CryptoNude. CryptoNude will probably be specifically just on PC at first, at least, because we've got already enough challenges in there to make it happen. But from a documentation point of view and a example point of view, I will be pushing that out eventually, what I'm talking about. But in essence, I think GameFi is huge opportunity to onboard people onto Bitcoin because it's fun. People go where fun is. Everybody acts like the friction of having to write down your words, 24 words and back up your seed phrase. Everybody acts like that's what's preventing people from, onboarding in the masses on Bitcoin. That's not the cause. It's what is going to make it worth it to the individual, and people will back up 24 words if what they're doing on the other end of that is fun. So obviously Bitcoin, number go up, that's fun. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like a passive form of fun almost for most people, especially when they look at it from a investment point of view. They just buy in and then let it grow and mature, right? So there's not a whole lot of day-to-day transactions happening with that. But with gaming, people are gaming constantly, and there's also kind of a problem with modern gaming in that gamers don't have much actual ownership over their time in the game. And leveraging on-chain assets for in-game assets or as in-game assets can help counterbalance some of that problem.
Yeah. So I think it also gives people a reason, what is because that's also, as much as it's kind of fun, which they do want to do, it's also well, what is my reason? Why would I do this rather than do this? And obviously, the ownership, I think, is a big thing. Because I keep going back to Spotify because obviously it's my wheelhouse. Music is I've been through, from, I've worked so long in the industry, literally from tapes from cassette to CD, CD to MP3, MP3 to streaming.
Nice.
And so I keep going back to that because it feels like a very similar story to me. And it gives me, if I pull back and I look at what that looks like, there's very few things that I can think of that have sped through technology like music has. Not only in how it's produced, but how it's made, how it's distributed, how it's listened to, in every single way, how it's visually, from kind of, just having like one TV show with music videos on in an interview through to MTV, through to YouTube, from listening to it on a record player on, with crappy speaker, or listening on a radio, then a record player, then, through to now with your tiny pods in your ears. And I kind of look at that and think to myself, well, because that's the thing, right? That what you said just now. People are going to go, because now they've had to buy a new device. All of your CDs or your tapes are totally useless. Your vinyls, okay, they're not anymore because vinyls have come back. So this to me is that question of, why did people move through these things? Look, it wasn't easy. At the time, there was a huge kickback with each one. It was radical kickback of people saying, I'm never going to use a CD because it cracks and it breaks. And then I'm never going to use MP3 because I'm not getting my album artwork. So people weren't happy to do it, but they did it, and they did it pretty quickly, and I just think to myself, why is that? Why did they? What enabled that? Because, you needed, but I suppose what it is because of centralized control. It's the record labels. They just took the music and stopped making tapes, and then they stopped making CDs, and then they stopped making, and they stopped building the devices.
Well, I think a part of it is users adopting to the, I guess you'd say, the decision making of central authorities, and also the central authorities adopting to the decision making of users. So some market dynamics of supply and demand, basically. And so, with all technology, as it progresses, it's going to either gain adoption or it's going to die, right? Because, that's, I guess, as a business model or service point of view, you need to have users, right? Or you need to have some sort of revenue track to maintain the business model. And, music, the major music industry obviously was trying to respond to, MP3s and, essentially music distribution that was outside their control. So that, they put I guess you'd say that sick the lawyers on Napster while they spun up, Spotify.
Yeah.
They're basically burning the bridge that was the free bridge while building the toll bridge. You know what I'm saying? That's basically what they did.
What they did. But that's the secret, is that they held the ultimate control. They didn't have to answer. The labels, once you sign a contract with a label, there was no indie labels, or there was no ability for artists to release music independently back in the day.
Exactly.
And once you signed that contract, you have no control over you gave away your rights. Like I said, still say, artists paid with their rights to the music for their right to be heard. And that's what you do. You just give it away. And so the record labels never had to answer to anybody. They just went, okay.
Yeah.
But again, we digress.
Yeah. There's most definitely parallels though, because, I would say though, the difference with how we can look at like GameFi and whatnot, the evolution of games, is if we introduce, I guess all digital assets in that sense, but if we introduce basically the blockchain in the mix, we have ownership abstracted through the chain, then, the moment basically, we'll use a crude example with CryptoNuts. Say we're all playing CryptoNuts and we all had our assets in CryptoNuts and we're all having a good time. And then all of a sudden, me as the builder of CryptoNuts decided to do something stupid, and everybody's like, what the hell are you doing? if it was a traditional model, I'd be like, tough cookies, you guys got to deal with it because I'm the authority on this game. Would be certain to a certain extent still true within the game I'm building, Cryptonauts, but within the assets that the users own, because they're on chain, that wouldn't be the case. You guys could
anybody
just be like, yeah, exactly. You could just spin up a game or you leverage those assets in a new way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a one-to-one, but another game developer could be like, hey, I don't like what that guy's doing over there with that game. We're going to integrate those assets, those on-chain assets into our game. You'll get this specific benefit if you use them in our game. Maybe you burn them in some sort of process. So like there becomes a better way for the consumer to have a little bit of effect on the decision making of the, I guess you'd say, the digital service that you're interfacing with.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. Again, we digress. See, whatever we start, it's just like, all right. So I mean, those are your main two builds, right? Going ahead into 2026. Is there anything else before we kind of move into looking at just a quick sort of look at why you would build on an L2 and the importance of building on an L2? Before we and Stacks' role there, is there anything else you kind of want to highlight what you're building or,
Yeah, dcast.io is a stream overlay service. So you can go to dcast.io and try an alpha right now. It basically allows you to, if you're streaming on Twitch or Kick or wherever, YouTube, you're probably already using an application called OBS or some similar application where you're allowed to create scenes and have overlays. This allows you to basically create an overlay, a little URL you can copy into your OBS instance as a browser overlay. And, when somebody sends you a tip, to your defined address that you log in on Dcast with, you'll get a pop-up on the screen when you're streaming. So dcast.io, if you want to check that out. Also, stackspot.app. It's basically a fun way that we're enabling users to stack together in basically a pot. So you can all come together in a pot, stack, and then the total yield that pot generates as a group gets randomly selected, or a winner is randomly selected on chain out of that, and then they get 90% of the yield on that. Also, the creator of that pot gets 5% of the yield. The starter of the pot, which is the person basically clicks the start button to start the stacking on it, they get 2% of the yield. The person that basically clicks close or complete basically that pot at the end of the cycle, they also get 2% of the yield. So there's, in essence, a way to stack together and I guess you'd say have a jackpot process in the process. Everybody keeps their principles, so they can just stack it in the next pot. So it's a pretty exciting way to stack. I think it's gonna be super interesting on how that gets integrated out there. We just did test net on that. We're close to going mainnet on that. So keep an eye out.
I think stacking is so utilized. Even things like, I think about it for random things, even say somebody wants to invest in what I'm building, even they don't have to lose their initial capital. It can go somewhere, depending on how much capital they've got, in terms of their Bitcoin. They keep the Bitcoin.
Exactly. But that's one of the, so we're starting on Stackspot with the jackpot type, where the winner's randomly selected out of the participants that are stacking in that pot. We're also going to have essentially a crowdfund type, where instead of the winner being randomly selected from the pot, the winner is predetermined and predefined during the creation of the pot. So that way everybody can kind of get together behind an idea and crowdfund that idea, and everybody's yield basically compounds towards that output address. So I think that will be huge, the crowdfund type, to be honest, because that's actually one of the core primitives of one of the things that we're wanting to see built into. So all the things we build has I guess, the capacity to like interconnect and have interoperability and like, integrate with each other. So StacksPot will be eventually integrated into BoostX. So you will be able to join pots right on the timeline, etc. I'll just leave it at that as a little teaser.
Yeah, amazing. But that's the thing. You've just made me sort of, based on the conversation we were having about music just now, you kind of got me thinking. And that's the major, and I said it myself, we didn't have opportunities for indie music back in the day. Whereas now, the biggest, if we had a platform and we had a reason for artists to go, okay, fuck that, I don't need to release my music on Spotify because I don't make any money anyway. It's not like you're saying to a musician, okay, listen, you're going to have to take a big cut in your earnings. Making 5 cents is more than they're making on Spotify. So, that's kind of the profit levels you have to look at for musicians. But to have people being able to crowdfund, for example, an album, and you say, listen, you put your money in, you're going to get all your money back, but the artist is going to get the yield, or even, and then they can sort of make music with it or stuff like that. So I think that kind of stuff is so important, using stacking to crowdfund and fund creators.
Oh yeah, that's been one of the, like, I guess my original desires for SocialFi has always been about leveraging the power of the timeline, because you can get, if you make something go viral, you can get millions of eyes on it, right? And if you can get everybody to pitch in on something on that during that process, then you can affect a large amount of change real quickly, because everybody's galvanized behind an idea, and there's monetary backing behind that idea in real time. So, I've always looked at it like, what if you could send a tip when you're liking? Well, what if you could send a tip when you're liking, and that tip is based on yield rather than just principle, right? Or both. What if the idea is, such a good idea, some people want to pass their yield to it, and some people want to pass their principle to it.
Yeah.
So
can you see, is there a place where you can see, because that in itself also just made me think, I mean, what a way to have proof of, let's say proof of work, but
proof of interest,
proof of performance, I would say, is the word. Because it would be so nice if somebody could click on my profile, for example, and see that I've had $100 worth of boosts. So I must be a human, and I must be releasing good content. I don't have to say anything else. I just have to go look at my boosts, because people are paying for my content. So if we could imagine, we could see, like, I don't know if you're building it, but like a tally of somebody's boosts. You're going to go to them and say, okay, I'd like you to do some social media for me, or that person, if I DM someone and say, hey, I'd like to interview on my show, they just have to look at my boosts and go, okay, that person's legit. It's not some weird AI or some weird bot.
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to tip a bot. Well,
that is that most definitely does happen. People do tip us, but
I know, as I said it, I was
probably don't know that that's happening. But
no offense to my husband, I love you, but you'll probably tip a bot.
So, yes, though, you make a great observation on how BoostX could be leveraged. We do have on our roadmap the leaderboards, basically coming in the first milestone for this, the final, 3 milestones of completing the roadmap. But, that allows you to basically check the rank and how many boosts somebody has sent and how many space drops somebody has sent, not necessarily how many they've received. So that you bring up a good, I guess you'd say, point there for me to consider, but it's all on chain. So like being able to measure it is right there, and just present it after you measure it.
It's just really presentation. Yeah, exactly. I just want to see, I would love to be able to do that, to keep, if you have a look at, there's an app called Fountain app. I think I've mentioned it to you before. It's like a podcasting. It's kind of going up against what Spotify's building, but it's for Bitcoin. And I kind of like it, and I'm thinking of putting my podcast on it. But what's nice there is you can see each episode that people put on there. You can actually see how many people have tipped that particular episode. So it's like a lovely way for you to kind of filter what you want to listen to, because you can immediately see what's popular and what's crappy, and who are good podcasters and who are not good podcasters. And the nice thing as well about that is a percentage of the earnings go to the listeners. So if I mean, you have to listen for like 7 million hours to earn anything valuable, but it's still, people respond to that kind of stuff. Interesting.
No, yeah,
There's interesting things going on. I love it.
That's super based. I mean, being able to track what content you create is resonating with people in terms of willingness to actually put skin in the game matters a lot, because noise is easy to make. Like you can make noise on the internet all for free all day long. I mean, we know bots are doing that all the time, right? But being able to track the actual signal in terms of value transmission, that is huge. So I most definitely will try to facilitate something within BoostX on the profile page. I mean, we did have kind of something similar in mind, but the way you described it wasn't exactly the same as what we were thinking. But it's all about the on-chain data, just presenting the on-chain data in interesting ways. And that data exists, obviously, because you can tell when you're receiving money, obviously. So I'll try to get that specifically on the.
There we go. Some alpha. What he's building. He's building live. It's happening, all going down here. There we go. Something for you to do in 2026 at some point.
Not like I have enough to do, but
exactly.
That's actually that's a really good design point, though. I mean, you have a really good design idea.
We now in minus sleep. So he not only never sleeps, but he's now
I'm in negative sleep. I'm in the debts on the sleep.
Yeah, kind of like fiat in sleep. That's what CryptoDude is.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so let's zoom out now at Stacks 2025 on Stacks. Let's talk about a couple of the highlights. Maybe we've kind of covered building on one question about building on L2s. We've been talking a lot about building on L2s. Why would you build on L2s? Why would somebody come along and leave Ethereum or leave Solana or leave anywhere and come and build on Bitcoin L2? Why is it important?
Bitcoin is the most widely distributed and adopted decentralized, blockchain we have. It's the most secure. Not to talk shade about Ethereum, but its consensus mechanism is not the same. So we basically have, proof of work is what I believe in. Like value and, I guess you'd say civilized society is based on work, right? So, building on Bitcoin is most easily done with stacks. Obviously you can build directly on Bitcoin, like on the L1 itself, though that's what stacks did, right? But, if you want to save yourself some headache and actually get to the good part and the creative part and the builder part and not have to go through the pains of the primitives, then, just get on board with stacks. We have an amazing technology stack. It's been the result of thousands of man hours by lots of different people. I mean, the innovation is relatively novel, but it's functionally, top notch. So we have, I guess you'd say, a different tech stack than what's available out there. Even if you're just comparing it to Ethereum, it's different. Even still, Ethereum has got lots of similarities, but there's most definitely clear differences. Like, for example, I'll give you one that's a little bit on the nerdy side, but post conditions, super important. I'm sure you've heard of people going on an Ethereum website and then, oh crap, I got all my stuff drained.
Yeah.
And that can be mitigated significantly with post conditions. Obviously, people need to do due diligence when they're reviewing their transactions with any wallet, but from a sneaky, sly point of view, it's much more difficult to, pull the wool over the eyes of a normie, so to speak, on Stacks than it is on Ethereum, because you have post conditions. You can basically analyze the transaction with, I guess you'd say, more confidence as an normie, because it's more readable. It's not just some abstract blob of data that you hope does what it says. It's actually like predictable. So
what is the difference between, okay, so Stacks has got its own language, Clarity. So nobody else uses Clarity, right?
Correct.
Setsus, I'm telling, this is for people who are watching this. Setsus has got a great course called 100 Days to Bitcoin. So all you have to do is Google 100 Days to Bitcoin on YouTube, and you'll find that course. We were talking about it yesterday on a show of mine, on how it will kind of like take you through learning about that. I just want to shout out Gary as well. I think it's called Zero to Clarity. Yeah. So there are ways for you to learn it. You do have to learn a new language to build on Stacks. But it is very important going forward for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, I think, this is just my personal view, yes, it's a great store of value, but I think it is also a store of culture, because culture is also value. And I think you need tools like Stacks to do that. And it is also, it allows you, I think, with Stacks to not just have Bitcoin as a vault, because that's very tempting to just go, this is a vault, lock it away. Then it doesn't become a peer-to-peer. And I think people are already nervous of using it as cash, because they're going, well, my future self might want to use it as cash, but my present self kind of just wants to hold on to it if I don't have to spend it. So, but there are ways to spend your Bitcoin. And so we've got Stacks, you're doing Clarity, and you can build apps on it. You can release NFTs. You can do gaming. We've discussed gaming. We've discussed ways on X. Those are all built around and on Stacks. Now, what is the difference between Stacks? I'm doing this for, obviously, for people who are listening and who are kind of interested in the idea of what you can do with Bitcoin besides just keeping it. What is the difference between Stacks and things like Rootstock and Lightning and things that aren't necessarily an L2?
In terms of like main differences, like I'll use Lightning, for example.
Like what are the main, just like quick differentiators between what these things are and what their purposes are?
Okay, so Lightning, I look at it as kind of like a side channel. Gotta have, I mean, it functions very kind of similarly to Stacks, and in the sense you're allowed, you can facilitate some, transactions that ultimately will settle to Bitcoin and, be backed by the security of Bitcoin. The difference being is, Lightning is, I guess you'd say, more cumbersome to use. It's not as easy in settlement. There's essentially channels are required to be opened and closed for, transmission of funds and settlement of funds. With Stacks, all that stuff just happens automatically.
But you can't build with or on Lightning, can you? I mean, you can't build apps or dApps.
To a certain extent, you can, but in a very crude, primitive. It's not extensible and programmable like it is on Stacks. Stacks offers more functional primitives and capabilities right there on chain. Right there, Lightning, there is no chain. The chain is Bitcoin. It's just when you're doing a transaction on Lightning, you're essentially kind of like doing a little, I guess, private transaction over here, right? And then when the channel is closed, that's when it settles onto Bitcoin. Right. So in essence, you're kind of operating in these IOU type of patterns on the side channel. And then when the channel is closed, that's when it settles and all those IOUs are basically, finalized, so to speak.
Right. And then
I like.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, in terms of stacks, how it parallels to Lightning, there, it's settling to Bitcoin for sure, but like there's no need to create channels. There's no need to close channels. The whole process is very automated. It's just part of the consensus of proof of transfer. So
yeah,
much more user friendly and developer friendly.
Mm.
I don't know if that answers you.
Yeah. I hear it often. I kind of hear people saying, or why would you need stacks if you've got things like Lightning? But the whole point of that is that, so that's kind of just really the point I wanted to get across, in case they are, because a lot of people kind of like are very pro Lightning and very anti stacks. That's kind of where I was going with this, and just kind of resolving that argument.
Yeah, I'm not anti Lightning. I mean, if people want to build on Lightning,
I think it's
still
more
aligned
Lightning
with
people that are anti-stacks. That the other
I think
way
they
around.
just. I think it's just because they're worried about their time invested in developing on Lightning. To be honest,
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you're building out something and a competitor comes along and it has a better value proposition that's offering similar service or more or less the same service in terms of like transacting with Bitcoin finality, that's really, I think, where the animosity comes from, because there is a competitive nature there between stacks and Lightning.
Yeah. All right. So we kind of like resolved that, and I just wanted to kind of head towards that question and put that out there as well. Right. So let's look at stacks. Let's look at the year we've just been through, kind of some of the highlights, just things that stood out to you.
Okay.
There's a lot of FUD going on. It's kind of like the price has obviously dipped a shitload. I mean, it hasn't been a great year across the board, but particularly for stacks when it comes to price, I don't think, building hasn't stopped. I think the community's kind of like whittled away a little bit, but we've still got a lot of, maybe not as many, but there's a lot of things going on stacks. And a lot of stuff behind the scenes as well. So I kind of just want you to, if you don't mind, sort of touch on a bit of that for us.
Sure. The way I look at it is the price of a token. It's not like to me, the thing that matters the most is the functionality and the capabilities for consistency of transactions. That's going to lead to the long-term valuation and long-term value security of the chain. And obviously that's why Bitcoin has value, right? It's so resilient. You can't kill Bitcoin, right? So that immutability of Bitcoin is what ultimately drives its value, right? And stacks leverages that immutability for programmability, right? And ultimately gives us as developers a lot more tools to leverage, to make our lives easier as a developer. So yes, the price action doesn't really logically reflect the value proposition, to be honest. But I can't predict the price, obviously, but I can kind of with confidence say that there's pretty much only one direction it should be going at this point.
And
look,
I mean, it's the builders. To me, what always stands out is the sort of, it's a long game, and it doesn't matter how, if you go up to a nice building and it looks amazing from the outside and everybody's like, we're selling all the furniture on the inside, and then you judge the furniture on the inside by the outside, and then you get there to fetch your furniture and there's nothing in the house. That's kind of how I look at a lot of these things that are going on, whereas you kind of know that the outside, the kind of like perception maybe, but inside, people are building, just let's go with my fucking, I don't know where I got that from, but the furniture analogy.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to generate hype if you throw a bunch of money at something, right? But being able to sustain the interest requires, a fundamental value proposition that is sound economically. And Stacks most definitely is tapping into that. It's recycling or reusing the proof of work that Bitcoin facilitates to extend its, I guess you'd say, functionality and capabilities. So, if you've programmed in the past, you would know that there are certain things that, you can do that, you're like, for example, oh, I need some data stored somewhere. Okay, you're going to use a database. Okay, well, what are the insecurities of that database? There's all sorts of things that you need to, when it comes to securing information, you need to consider. And, if that data can be publicized, or I guess you can even encrypt it still, but basically, if you want a way to secure that data in a more secure manner, you can leverage a blockchain, right? And Bitcoin is basically giving programmers and businesses a point of truth, basically, for financial records that has never been really consistent. Like in traditional banking, banks are ripping each other off all the time. Like that happens. Like everybody acts like, oh, the banks they're just settling transactions. No, they're like, no, you didn't give us money. 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 It's constant, the counterparty risk, just constant counterparty risk. And so when you don't have counterparty risks, a bunch of innovation can take place that was not possible before because of the counterparty risk. And so that's where we're at. We're basically almost like reinventing the financial rails in a more secure manner in real time. That's kind of what's like taking place. And so during that process, entrenched establishments across various industries are going to get disrupted because they don't leverage that same security model. And so Bitcoin ultimately is kind of like a truth that is backed by math. And the more we can leverage truth in a society to secure our finances, the greater the prosperity, I believe.
Yeah. And the most perfect language I think there is math, right? Because
exactly.
You can play with somebody. I was saying to somebody the other day, you kind of say the word home, and the minute you can't, how difficult communication is. Because if I say the word home, neither of us will ever think the same. It might have a meaning in the dictionary, but neither of us will ever say the same definition if we had to just put a personal definition out there. And 100 different words will appear in your mind, so many different pictures. But if I say to you, what's 4 + 4? There's just no other thing you can think of.
Exactly.
So I've come to love math so much,
that's the language of the universe. It really is. And so the more we can align with it, the more we'll be better aligned with, the universe and like creation. Like I'm philosophically aligned and spiritually aligned here. You know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to basically be the change that, I want to be. And I think people ultimately are good people at the end of the day. 9 out of 10 or 99 out of 100 are good people. We shouldn't let the outlying, I guess you'd say, statistical probability of a bad person, we shouldn't let that dictate how we structure society.
Yeah, but I mean, you and me, that's another conversation we got to have, because bad people are going to bad. It's not
exactly.
like law makes bad people stop being bad. Otherwise, we would live in the Garden of Eden. But bad people are still bad on a daily basis everywhere, So it's not going to law and, it doesn't stop people from being bad. It just introduces punishment to some people who are bad,
Exactly.
And I agree with you that if left alone, we wouldn't be as bad as we think we would be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think either. We would, and I think the proof of that is in Bitcoin, how people can work together for very often, nobody got into Bitcoin right back in the day thinking, yes, let's, pump my bags. It
No.
there was none of that. It was just something for people to use for a better society. And I just
freedom to transact.
Pardon?
The freedom to transact, basically.
Yeah. So really good. Okay, well, we got sidetracked again. We were supposed to be looking back on the year on Stacks. And now we're going up to 2 hours. Okay, this is my end of year 2 hour special that's going on here. Oh my God. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting year on Stacks. And I think it's going to be an interesting year ahead as kind of things settle around the endowment and we start getting sort of more direction. So yeah, what are your kind of like, let's just do a short kind of like Stacks 25 and Stacks 26.
Okay.
Just your basic thoughts on it. Doesn't have to be long or.
My basic thoughts on 2025.
Yeah, like good. What are just a few of the highlights, so that we can look back and remember this.
Okay. Personal highlights for me is BoostX went live in February of 2025. Let's go. That was the result of literally over a decade of R&D by me. So let's go.
Oh, let's go.
Now, I'm sure that somebody could have probably figured it out faster, but they didn't. So
they didn't. No.
So yeah, I will most definitely look at 2025 with a lot of fond memory. Like despite the price action, I got news for you folks. You don't get to take it with you when you're dead. So
yeah,
ignore the price action and start building towards the philosophy. And 2025 is basically a year where I was able to kind of feel a sense of, personal relief, because I've, achieved some technical milestones that I've been looking to achieve for quite a while. So that's really nice to have a little bit of that weight lifted off the shoulders. There's been other highlights, obviously, with other projects that, have trends, happened during 2025 on Stacks. But, personally, for me, the main thing was BoostX in February going live. That was very important for me. That was the result of a lot of R&D.
Yeah, congratulations on that. And I really look forward to where it's going to go in 2026. Yeah, I think we're going in on 2 hours now. I'd love to sit and chat with you for another hour. I had to cut all my tangents short.
I know. It's hard not to go down tangents with me. I'm sorry.
I know, me as well.
I can go down them big time, so.
No, we can definitely do this again, and I look forward to it. But I think I want to go and bake some muffins now to take with me. Nice. I'm baking some carrot cake muffins with pecan nut to take with me. We're going away tomorrow for New Year's Eve. Yeah, look at me. Got many sides to me too. I can build food. All right. What have we missed? Is there anything else you'd kind of like to add before we sort of close up?
I think here, just keep an eye out for Stacks in 2026. Lots of interesting stuff happening from the roadmap of Stacks itself to all the different things that are coming in D grants and all the projects that are basically building right now. There's I guess you'd say a lot of people with heads down right now, just hammering on their objectives. So keep an eye out on 2026 with Stacks. I mean, there's a ton coming. I mean, not just from me, obviously, but from a bunch of different people. But there's most definitely a lot coming from me as well.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think that I just feel like I've left out so much, but we'll do it again.
That happens.
Yeah.
Tangents will do that to us. It's all good though.
We'll isolate a bunch of shows. We'll do the philosophy of Bitcoin, philosophy. We'll do a little bit about banks and politics.
Yeah, this type of stuff needs to be talked about more in Stacks, because that's what, I mean, aside from just the nature of Bitcoin, the thing that drove a lot of Bitcoin adoption was how it's philosophically aligned with, the human spirit. And like, basically there's a lot of stuff that we kind of like don't really talk about in Stacks, but we should double, triple, quadruple down on what brought us here, what keeps us here, what actually is like the purpose behind all this. It's to build, a better world for the next generation. It's not just to be like, oh, number go up. Yes, number go up is nice, but it's better than number go up. Having clean conscience.
Yeah, and number will go up anyway if you build good shit.
Bingo.
So yeah. So I mean, it's really right now is the time to be building, I think. You're gonna miss the boat if you don't. And specifically, I think, people are not going to just onboard for money.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not. The average person doesn't have any money. So whether they are compelled, they're used to living inside an institution guiding them through their life. So they're going to wait for the government to say, okay, now you have to use a central bank currency, or they're going to wait for the fiat system to collapse. And then, there's always going to be two factions, I think, but what will really drive them into something is, like you were saying earlier, having fun. And if, you can't really build the kind of stuff that you're building on Stacks on Bitcoin. So you kind of need a layer 2 to drive adoption to Bitcoin, because that also helps, because once people are spending, because, also what I think about is you can get a lot of Stacks for a little bit of money, which then makes you feel like you've built up capital, even though it might only be worth $100. You've got however many Stacks you can buy for $100 right now. So yeah, I just think that we need Stacks.
Oh, absolutely.
Bitcoin.
Facilitating the fun is a huge thing for me for the adoption. Like, you can only get people so excited about the technicalities. You only get people so excited about the number go up proposition. The thing that will drive most adoption is the fun factor. Facilitate the fun, build the change, and you'll facilitate the fun. There is, I guess you'd say, what's the easiest way of putting this? Not a risk to reward ratio, but like, people spend their time, right? That's the most valuable resource they have. They're constantly spending their time.
Yeah.
So if what you're proposing them to spend their time on doesn't have some sort of immediate or midterm or long-term value proposition that they can measure, then they will not onboard.
Yeah.
So it's all about the measurability.
Yeah.
And the fun. So like, the more you can have the fun and the more you can measure the fun to prove that there's fun, the more people are going to be like, oh, these guys are having fun over here.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. What do you do at the end of your workday? You don't go and like stick a pin in your eye. You go home and you
have some fun.
You go and swipe around on your phone or watch Netflix. Yeah, exactly. So that's what it is about. It's about building for fun.
The pursuit of happiness.
Let's put that as the kind of like motto or drive for 2026. Let's facilitate the fun. I really love that.
I dig it.
Yeah, let's go. Let's facilitate the fun. So thank you very much for joining me. Let's just sort of sum up where people can find you. Do you want to pop those? Let us know.
Yeah, it's at CryptoDude_BTC on X. You can find the BoostX at BoostX_app on X. I'll just leave it at that.
All right. I think if they head over to CryptoDude_BTC, they'll be able to find all the things you're building anyway. So
yep.
You can check those out. Look for CryptoNauts, look for BoostX, look for StacksPot, look for Dcast. So a lot going on. But John, thank you so much for joining me. I absolutely love talking to you, and I look forward to lots more conversations in 2026. And a reminder before I go that this is independent Bitcoin media. And if you enjoy the show, you can support me, you can like, you can share, you can subscribe. Please do those things because they help me keep this going.
Send her a boost. Send her a boost.
Yes, mel.btc. Go check it out. You can do it on, you can't do it on your phone though yet. You need to use your browser, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in case you go onto your phone and you go, I can't find it, you do need to use your web browser.
Yeah, it's a browser extension. So once mobile browsers start supporting extensions, it'll be right there ready. I mean, technically it was usable on mobile for a little bit, but I don't want to recommend that browser that it was functional with, because browsers. But mobile soon enough.
Try it out. Head over, download BoostX, hook it up to your X, and test it out with mel.btc. Anyway, all right. Well, it's been an awesome show with you, CryptoDude. It's been a definite almost 2 hours now, so a definite end of year special. When I asked CryptoDude if he'd do the show with me, I did say let's do an end of year special. So there we go. And yeah, just wishing everybody an incredible New Year's celebration. And a beautiful start to 2026. Stay safe out there. And yeah, and remember, we were talking a lot about finance and about Bitcoin. This isn't financial advice. I just have to say that for legal purposes. It's for it is for informational purposes only. Do what you want with that information. So yeah, Happy New Year. Here's to 2026. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in and watched the show. I do appreciate every single one of you. And I will see you in a week's time. It's Thursday, 11 a.m. ET. We are here with new guests, people that are shaping the future of Bitcoin. So thank you very much. And I shall see you next year.
Later.
Cheers, CryptoDude. Bye.